May 9th, Moscow. Tanks rolled across Red Square. A parade of power watched by a war-weary world. And standing among Russia's shrinking circle of allies, two European leaders defy the tide. Their message: Europe's war with itself has begun, not with weapons, but with words. Back in Europe, the backlash is ferocious. One side calls for peace through unity. The other for sovereignty above all else, as Europe fractures before our eyes. The real question now isn't where leaders stand. It's what comes next. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico has thrust himself into the center of a diplomatic storm, openly challenging the European Union's stance on Russia during his controversial visit to Moscow for World War II victory commemorations. Fico made his intentions crystal clear about Slovakia's relationship with Russia. In a letter to the Vice President of the European Commission, Fico wrote, "I am in Moscow to pay tribute to more than 60,000 soldiers of the Red Army who died while liberating Slovakia. I do not see what these brave individuals have to do with the current international situation." This sharp retort came in direct response to callous criticism that those attending Putin's parade were not on the right side of history. Figures later continued with remarkable frankness as a high-ranking official of the European Commission. "You have absolutely no authority to criticize the sovereign prime minister of a sovereign country who approaches all European matters constructively." This meeting with Vladimir Putin marked Fico, his second Kremlin visit in just 5 months, signaling a dramatic shift in Slovakia's foreign policy that has alarmed many EU officials under Fico, his leadership. Slovakia has halted military aid to Ukraine, criticized EU sanctions against Russia, and repeatedly voiced opposition to Ukraine's potential NATO's membership. Perhaps most pointed was Fico's challenge to the very foundation of current EU diplomatic policy. I disagree with the policy of a new Iron Curtain, which you're working on so intensively. The journey to Moscow itself became a symbol of defiance after Baltic nations took extraordinary measures to prevent vetoes. Attendance at the Victory Day parade. Lithuania and Latvia closed their airspace to flights carrying guests to the military celebrations, forcing both Fico and Serbian President Alexander visited to find alternative routes. Speaking from Sydney before his departure, an indignant Fico railed against what he perceived as unprecedented obstruction. Some countries cannot afford to celebrate the day of liberation from fascism, so they commemorate this day as the day of the end of World War II. Therefore, let us appreciate that we celebrate this day as part of the winners, and in it we particularly emphasize the anti-fascist message. We promised the public that we would hold dignified celebrations. For example, Cyril and Methodius, the memory of the Carpathian Duca operation, the Slovak national uprising. Today is also a confirmation that we honor this commitment, and we want to continue to thank everyone who came and the organizers, the Ministry of Defense. With what feelings do you go to the parade in Moscow? We still have problems getting there. We are fighting for the flight permits to fly over. It is incomprehension to me. Even in 2015, I was criticized for my trip to Moscow, but no one banned flights. Anti-Russian madness has no boundaries. What should have been a straightforward 2.5-hour flight instead became a 5-hour odyssey over Hungary, Romania, the Black Sea, Georgia, and finally into Russia. Vučić, whose country aspires to join the EU, faced similar obstacles, eventually routing through Azerbaijan. The Serbian president remained defiant despite knowing his attendance would carry consequences for Serbia's EU ambitions. Footage wrote on Instagram after laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Today, we pay our respects to all the heroes who laid down their lives as the foundation of peace after the suffering of the Second World War. The Kremlin was quick to portray these leaders' perseverance as acts of courage and condemned the airspace closures as hostile moves by European nations. These days, it is simply an act of heroism, showing one's sovereign will to pay tribute to the memory of Victory Day. Despite the blatant frenzy, the pressure is worthy of the highest praise. The symbolism of their presence wasn't lost on European observers. These were the only European leaders standing alongside Putin as he presided over a parade of military forces. The same forces currently waging war against Ukraine. The diplomatic fracture widened as other European leaders issued sharp rebukes of their colleagues. Moscow visit. This extraordinary public rebuke between EU leaders illustrates the deepening ideological schism that Putin's war has created within European politics. The Poland's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, didn't mince words when addressing those attending Putin's parade. Like the president, I try not to comment the decisions and behavior of the leaders of other countries, especially those in our European Union community. But there is no doubt in my mind that attendance at the victory parade in Moscow, I applaud President Putin saying that he will continue to cleanse Ukraine of Nazism, brings shame on anyone who is there and pretends not to see the truth, because this truth in this case is simply black and white here. There is nothing to speculate here. There is nothing to interpret. So the presence at the victory parade of those who bombed cities, hospitals, kindergartens, who led to the death of more than 1 million people to death or serious wounds within 3 years. So attendance at the parade, the military of such a state brings shame, and nothing more needs to be added here. French President Emmanuel Macron added his own critique, stating with characteristic diplomatic understatement, "As for the presence of any prime minister, I will not comment on the freely made decisions of any European leader. I am convinced that probably I would like to remind you that there is a difference between the Moscow of yesterday and the Brussels of today. The divide grew. Stark is still, as Britain, France, Germany, and Poland coordinated a powerful countergesture, a joint visit to Kiev marking the first time leaders of these 4 nations traveled together to Ukraine. The unity message arrived with a concrete proposal, a 30-day ceasefire initiative backed by the threat of new sanctions should Moscow refuse. In a joint declaration, the 4 European leaders said alongside the U.S., "We call on Russia to agree a full and unconditional 30-day ceasefire to create the space for talks on a just and lasting peace." The contrast couldn't be more striking. While Fico and footage stood in Moscow's Red Square watching military hardware parade past, EU diplomats gathered in Lviv to honor victims of Russian aggression and back a special tribunal to investigate alleged Russian war crimes. Callous, the very diplomat Fico had so publicly rebuked, led a 17-strong delegation of EU officials and foreign ministers to Ukraine. Her message was clear: all those who truly support peace cannot stand side by side with Putin. Those who truly support peace should be in Ukraine tomorrow, not Moscow. As European leaders plot their delicate path forward, Vučić perhaps most directly acknowledged the geopolitical tightrope he walks. I won't stay silent, and I'm telling you now, my response will be serious, responsible, and prepared in advance. I will tell the EU exactly what I think about every type of political relationship they've had towards Serbia, and the country will continue on its path, both its European path and every other course previously established. And if someone has to pay the price, it will be me, not Serbia. The Baltic states, meanwhile, have demonstrated just how far they're willing to go to isolate Russia using their airspace as a geopolitical tool. Lithuania's president, Gitanas Nausėda, cited vague security reasons for blocking the diplomatic flights, signaling a hardening stance among Russia's European neighbors. With U.S. President Donald Trump now pushing for a rapid diplomatic solution and threatening increased sanctions against Russia, Europe finds itself at a crossroads, divided between those seeking rapprochement with Moscow and those standing firmly with Ukraine in its hour of need.